Let's talk about sex. So tonight I'm going to answer some of the questions that you guys have submitted to me, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my sexual journey and my love journey and the way those have intertwined. And as we get started, some of you have heard parts of my story before, and I was thinking about, what did I want to share with you tonight about my journey? And I guess what really came up for me was, where did my sexuality start? And as many of you have heard, it also shut down massively at one point, and actually for many years. And so, but I thought about it as I was contemplating tonight, and I'm like, wow, I had sexual experiences pretty early on, and they weren't what you'd call the traditional sexual experiences, but I was aware of my sexuality at a fairly young age. I was thinking tonight about one of the memories that I have, and it was probably, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to guess 8 or 9, and I had no idea that it was sexual. But I think I had my first orgasm at about 8 years old. And I apologize, forgetting to turn off all the sounds in the room so that they don't interfere with our conversation. And so I was thinking about it, and I think I hadn't remembered this until literally about 30 minutes ago when I was thinking about what did I want to share, that I think I had my first orgasm when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and didn't know that's what it was, but I told you I'd be raw and juicy and open tonight. And so what I discovered at some point by accident, and I'm going to guess that maybe I was 7 when I first discovered it, was that playing in the backyard. We had one of those old A-frame swing sets, and I think we used to slide down the bars of those swing sets. Like you were, sliding down, it wouldn't have been a straight like fireman's pole, but just sliding down those poles, we'd hang onto the top and drop down. Well, I'm going to guess someday when I was maybe 7, might have been 8, but I think I was probably closer to 7, I started to slide down one of those poles, and I remember feeling, oh, what's that between my legs? And I was reflecting and smiling tonight that I'm like, wow, I discovered that energy really early on. And so after I experienced it once, I was kind of hooked. I'm like, that felt good. I want to do that again. And so I found myself over the next couple of years sneaking out to the swing set. And eventually I realized that if you didn't just slide down it, but if I hung onto the top and wrapped my legs around the bar, I could really actually stimulate myself in a pretty exciting, and I didn't know it at the time, but thinking back, kind of an erotic kind of way. And so that was my first experience with sexuality. So I was awake and enjoying those buzzes and those tingles and all that amazing energy between my legs. And then going a few more years to where we actually started learning about sex, and we had that conversation in the book about the birds and the bees. And then it was like, oh, what is this? And do I really want anything to do with this? And I'd completely forgotten about those earlier experiences, didn't ever connect that they were related. And then got into my teenage years and growing up in the very conservative Midwest and learning that there was a lot of ways that sex was not okay, and trying to find that confusion of wanting to be the good girl and wanting to do it right and honor this idea that no sex before marriage. And my body was turned on, but I also wanted to be the good girl. So I had the guy that broke up with me because I wouldn't sleep with him, and then later it was, so that was like, okay, damned if I don't. But, then it was a few years later, and it was like, well, okay, I'm going to explore. And I didn't actually have intercourse until actually I was in college. But I played a lot in high school. But there was a way in which at one point my mom found out about some of my playing, and she wasn't too thrilled with me. And there's nothing bad about that. It's just that we grow up in different generations and different ages. And so in that moment, I took on a lot of shame around my sexual desire and my sexual energy. And so it was very confusing for me. And I had an experience in college where I also had a scare of getting pregnant at one point. And the chances were like slim and none, but my period was very erotic. My period was very erratic back then. And so I was very, very late at one point, and it was all natural, but scared me. Okay, now sex is dangerous for another reason. And then STDs and HIV came out right as I was entering college, and it was like, okay, there's another reason that sex is scary and bad. And I was like, ugh. And eventually, in my I'd say my early 20s and well into my 30s, I struggled with sex. I got married at 22, and we both of us, in an ideal kind of way, wanted it and enjoyed the connection, but the real raw juiciness we never really found. And it was much more of a struggle for me than it was for him. And I think that impacted, sadly, it had a huge impact on our relationship. And for many reasons, we only stayed together about 4 years. But I remember back to those times, and some part of my body wanted it so badly. And then another part was pushing it away. And I became very non-orgasmic. And it was through that journey and through that time that I started to, in one way, shut down, and in another way, long for. I was already shut down in my energy so that I couldn't reach orgasm, but even started to then shut down to my desire. Why does this matter? I don't, do I really need this? Is it really important? There's still some part of my mind that would go, it's gross. and that was, as that pops up, it's like the first memory of reaching out and touching a man on his penis. And we were kids, we were teenagers, but was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And the sad part is those early experiences where we feel at a loss, we feel on some level incompetent, on some level like we don't have a clue what we're doing. And then we're worried about pleasing the other partner, or we're worried about pleasing the other person, pleasing our partner. And then we're sort of worried about trying to, well, I'm supposed to feel good here too. And why is it that this isn't working for me? And so now I'm going to focus over there, and then I'm going to focus over here, and I'm going to try to do that all at the same time. Well, one of the things that I think I spoke about last month, and that we'll talk about more as we go forward, and in one of my upcoming programs called Tantric Loving and Sacred Sexuality, we'll talk about the aspect of giving and receiving, and how, as a man or a woman, the ecstasy of just being able to receive pleasure, the ecstasy of just being able to offer pleasure, and in our offering of pleasure, how much ecstasy there is in our own bodies. And so I speak to both men and women in that women, we so often want to pleasure our partner. We want to make sure that we're not taking too much. We want to make sure that it's equal. And I love men, because what I've been amazed about over the years in both my personal experiences as well as working with clients and talking to friends is that men love to turn us on. God, we're lucky. They want us to feel good. They want us to be pleasured. And that the truth is, and I wish I had men here to like jump up and say yes, but they've said yes in my workshops and events, is that our pleasure, our willingness to be pleasured and be turned on is actually an incredible turn on to them. And so when we don't allow our pleasure, we actually, it's a way that we don't inspire our men as much. And so women, I invite you to find your pleasure for you and to trust that your man wants to turn you on and that your pleasure is his pleasure. Your pleasure excites him. Your pleasure makes him hard, turns him on. And so to really explore that And then flipping back to that idea of receiving. Men, how awesome is it for you when she's kissing, she's giving you a blowjob, she's kissing your penis, she's licking and blowing and tasting and sucking and enjoying and getting pleasure out of pleasuring you? How amazing is it for you to just be able to receive that pleasure? And so I went right for the juicy stuff, but we can do the same thing in a kiss. We can do the same thing by bringing our tongue, oh, ever so slowly. I can't use my tongue and talk to you at the same time, but it's that feeling, the texture and the juice of our lips. And when we get into talking about kissing and another sacred sexuality practice of kissing in a powerful way that is conscious, that's giving, receiving, we start to understand the different energies of the inner lip, the outer lip, the different energy of the top lip versus the bottom lip. How those create different sparks of energy with our partner. And how the energy center of our lips and our mouth so directly is tied to the energy center of our sexuality. And it is that entire exploration of every part of our body, from our lips to our heart center, to our bellies, to our toes, to our yonis and our lingams, which in sacred sexuality in Sanskrit, lingam is the word for penis, and in Sanskrit it means wand of light. And so men, what would it be like for you to penetrate your woman with a wand of light? What would it be like to offer your light all the way up to her heart? What if your cock, your lingam, could be as long as you're up to reach her heart? And the truth is, it is. Once you learn to know your energy, to move your energy, to bring your energy to your woman, you can touch her that deeply. You can touch her through your whole body with the power of your wand. And yoni, the word for vagina, means sacred space. And there's a lot of words out there that get used for a woman's sexual center. And that sexual center, what if it was a sacred space? What if it was, I apologize, I'm pausing, I'm noticing, I'm watching the monitor of the recording. And so what if it was a sacred space to be honored, to be respected, to be cherished, to be enjoyed just as much? But what if, men, it was actually an honor for you to treasure, to be allowed to enter her sacred space, to be allowed to penetrate with your fingers, to be allowed to penetrate with your tongue, to be allowed to penetrate with your penis, with your lingam? And what if the two of you together, when you bring these two powerful sacred centers, could take energy that transformed not just your pleasure, not just made your orgasms so much more intense, but what if it transformed your life? What if it transformed every aspect of your life? And this is more and more, I'll speak to this as we continue tonight, and it's a piece that we'll touch on in that sacred sexuality event that's coming up. It is that this sacred energy, this sexual energy, ignites our entire life. It brings the awakening to our whole being. And I'll share with you that when I learned this, and that the power of what I could generate through using, just by squeezing the muscles intentionally of my sexual center, and men, you can do this just as much as women can, and to draw that energy up from my genitals, up into my body, I can use that for everything in my life. I can use it for energy if I want to clean the house if I want to. I can use it for energy to bring my juice and my fire to a business meeting. I do it often before I talk. I'll take a pause, and nobody knows that I'm squeezing the muscles on my pelvic floor, but I'm squeezing them, I'm feeling them, I'm pulling that juice up. And then I'm using that to offer. I'm being gifted with my own sexual energy to then bring to the world more of who I am, more of my passion, more of my excitement. And so this is what's possible. One, not just this is what's possible, it's one of the many, many, many things that are possible when we awaken the power of our sexual energy, not just for pleasure. And the pleasure is damn good. Yeah. But what else is possible? There's an incredible healing aspect of our sexuality. Again, another aspect of sacred sexuality and Tantra is the healing that gets created. And I don't know how many of you are like me, but if you're like me and many of the clients that I work with, many of the people that have come to my workshops, we've all had some wounding around our sexuality. Whether it's like the stories that I told of the damned if you do and damned if you don't kind of experiences, or the confusion, or the feeling of incompetency, or I'm not good enough at this, or how do I be better at this because I know I'm not good enough right now. Whatever our stories are, whatever our shames are. And not all of us have shames, but many of us do, whether it's from our parents or our religions or the different experiences that we've had. The number of people that get laughed at for their sexuality because they didn't do it right, or they get laughed at because they ask for what they want, and some part of us shuts down, and then it happens in a different way and another part shuts down, and then we get our heart broken, and you know what, sometimes it just doesn't feel worth it anymore. And so these are some of the things that when we bring consciousness and awareness to our sexuality, they can heal us, they can ignite our passion, they can make us better at whatever it is we're bringing to the world. It can make the connection with our lover so deep and so powerful. Your eyes are part of your sexuality. We've talked about your lips and your tongue as your sexuality. Your heart is part of your sexuality. Your hands, your touch, every single part of your body, your skin is part of your sexuality. And the pleasure, the connection, the opening, the bliss that can come when we are in our authentic lover, when we are resting as who we truly are. And we bring that passion, we bring our desire to our partner. Yes, we bring our desire to our partner. It is hot. And just because we bring our desire, our authentic desire, doesn't mean our partner has to respond. And that's where we get to be set free in our sexuality, is the ability to say yes and no. And men and women alike. And often it's the women that have to find this first, is our ability to say no, because there's a lot of women in the world, myself included, that did a lot of sexual things to get love. And then we regretted it. And so that's one of the things that we get to heal from, so that we come back to our power of being the treasure that we are, and that we honor, not just that we want men to honor our sacred space, our yoni, but that we give it deep, deep honor with the blessings that it brings us. And so these are some of the things that are possible for us as we explore. And so I'm going to look down at some of the questions that have come in, and I want to answer a few questions, and then I'll come back and tell you, well, not that I'm going anywhere, but I will continue to tell some more stories and share some more insights from my journey. But let's take a look at some of the questions that came in and answer some. So let's see. One of the questions was, so you talk about longer orgasms. What are the keys to having longer orgasms? This is a good question, because both men and women alike can have longer orgasms. Both men and women alike can have multiple orgasms. Yes, men, multiple orgasms. And part of that comes from our ability to ride the wave of the orgasm. And so often we're wanting to get over the top of that orgasmic wave. We're going for the peak. I'm going for it. I'm going for it. Men and women alike. It's like, I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. And then and we drop. And for women, if it's a clitoral orgasm, and there's all kinds of orgasms for us, but a clitoral orgasms, it's like we hit that peak and then it's like, hey, don't touch me. Enough, stop. And that doesn't always happen, but often we've peaked so high and so intensely that now we're hypersensitive. And so what could happen if that wave could ride longer and longer and longer and longer? And so this peak, as we're getting to it, we could actually ride it out in time and experience even more of that orgasmic pleasure. And so there's many variables that contribute to it, and particularly in week 2 of the upcoming Sacred Sexuality and Tantric Love workshop that we'll be doing online, there's our breath and our sound. And breath and sound are actually 2 really huge contributors to the length of our orgasm. And so our breath, a lot of times we're riding that peak and we're moving up and we want to hold on to the breath, and there's a way it tightens the body. And yet the power of the orgasm comes in the openness and the expansion of the body. And so we want to use that breath to ride the wave. And our breath, and then giving it a sound, and even more. So the second component is sound. And most of us have been taught to keep our sexuality hidden. Keep it over here, put it away, don't let anybody know, keep it secret, especially how many of us as teenagers were trying to keep it secret, and so that nobody know what we were up to. And then we don't want the neighbors to hear, and we don't want the kids to hear. And yet our sound is an intense vehicle for expanding our pleasure, for intensifying, for elongating that time. And so that's what we'll talk about, is the breathing techniques. And so here's one simple breathing technique that you can practice with your partner. And this one is not quite to the point, it'll start teaching you how to elongate your orgasm. And this one's more about connecting, but it's the same breath that you'll use to elongate the orgasm. So kind of a 2-for-1 here. And that is what we call a mirrored breathing. And so as I breathe in, my partner would breathe in. And so simultaneously, one of you typically leads. Most often, the woman breathes naturally and the man follows her. And this can be reversed. And it's just a great way to get started, is to let the man follow the woman's breath. So as I breathe in, he's going to breathe in, same breath. Pause, and then exhale. And in that breathing, it's as if you're breathing up through the base of your spine, up through the perineum, the space just below the tailbone, at the pelvic floor, where you're going to breathe. It's as if you could breathe up from there and let the breath fill all the way up, holding it, pausing, and then releasing that breath. And so you can do this with a partner. You can do it in a hug. I said mirror breathing. It can also be called synchronized breathing. And so you can do that in a hug and share that energy with each other. You can do that in a spooning position. You can do that while you're making love, while he's inside her. And you can let that energy move. And you can breathe up. Women, you can imagine, I shared that his lingam can reach all the way up to your heart. He can reach up all the way through you with that wand of light. And you can breathe him up. Oh, and it takes that energy that's coming from our sexual center and it's sending it through our whole body, and we can tingle and we can feel the vibrations that are going up. And this is what starts to lead us into full body orgasms, where not just our genitals are contracting and expanding, but the whole body is expanding in this pleasure. And so using that same technique as you're riding that peak, men and women alike. And men, it's a little bit more complicated to work with you guys because there's that point of no return that you're moving up that curve of turn on, and at some point the orgasm is just going to happen and you can't pull back from that edge. So where you guys get to work is finding that point where you've gotten up so high on the peak that it's feeling so incredible, and then being able to ride that using your breath, using your sound, so that you don't go over that point of no return until you choose to. And in the advanced tantric work, you can actually look at, this is going to sound crazy to some of you men, but separating your orgasm from your ejaculation. And trust me, I've witnessed this, is that the orgasm without ejaculating is immensely equally as powerful as the one with ejaculation. You just get to go again, and you get to go again and again. And it is this that allows you, this practice, that should you choose to explore it, would allow you to elongate your pleasure even more. And so this breath, just practice what it's like when you're starting to get to those higher, reaching the higher points of your peak, breathing up, feeling what it's like to expand the energy up through your body. And then give it a sound. And I talked about, we're kind of taught to keep it quiet. But good sound, let me tell you, oh my God, can send that orgasm over the top in not just that peaking kind of way, because yes, that can still happen and does, but it lets you ride it for much longer, and it intensifies it. So it's like, okay, great. I was having an orgasm that's a 6 or a 7. Now I got one that's a 10 or a 12. Okay, that works for me. So this is what's some of the other things that are possible when we start using our breath and our sound. There's other ways that we can use our muscles to intensify and elongate our orgasms. But I'll keep a few of those for next time so that we can look at a couple more questions. So let's see. What's another question that we have here? You guys were great about submitting questions, so thank you so much. One of the questions was, we live apart. Is phone sex out there, or is it a healthy, intimate practice for couples that live apart? Yes, yes, yes. It is not out there. It is a very healthy, natural part of our sexuality. Our sexuality is alive whether we're in relationship or not. Our sexuality is alive whether we're lying next to someone or we're across the globe. So we can bring and awaken our sexuality with ourselves. We can self-pleasure. We can speak sexual. We can sexting. Don't recommend it for teenagers. I'm pretty against it for the kids that don't know what it's about. But for those of us that are grown adults, yeah, sexy texts, sexy voicemails, sexy phone calls that are just that delicious words that turn up the fire for when we get to next see each other. for across the country, to be able to pleasure ourselves while we're listening to the pleasure of our partner, while we're sharing and speaking about our sexuality. So I wrote an article last Sunday about and I called it, "Are You Talking About Sex?" And phone sex is an incredible way to start practicing getting comfortable talking about our sexuality. And it's been hard for me. It was super hard the first few times I did it. And sometimes now, you know, if I'm perfectly honest, phone sex can get a little bit like, oh, you know, still that conservative girl will show up sometimes. And, you know, just having a general conversation about sex. If I happen to be in a certain space, certain emotional space, my shyness can show up. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just loving that part and inviting it to find its way into full expression. And so phone sex is a great way to honor the pleasure and the intimacy that's between you, to let that orgasmic energy juice your body. And there are so many studies. You know, I refer to Dr. Mehmet Oz a lot, talking about the sexual famine in North America, in the US. And truly, truly believe and know for myself that as I keep my sexuality more alive, I am more juicy in every part of my life. And so, again, another reason to keep your sex life alive, whether you're apart or together. And no, all of us want sex every day? We don't. And some of us do. And it doesn't really matter what your pattern is, what your frequency is, if it works for you. I often invite couples to commit to 5 minutes of intimate connection, physical connection every day. And that physical connection does not have to be intercourse. It doesn't have to be oral sex. She doesn't have to be going down on you. You don't have to be going down on her, man. It's simply that you've chosen to come together, spooning, come together to eye gaze, come together to kiss, come together to touch your tongues. Whatever it is. To come together to feel your chests next to each other. To come together to offer sacred spot massage. Sacred spot referring to, in a woman, referring to the G-spot. And so the G-spot, very orgasmic. It's also a very sacred space, and it's a very healing space. So there are many, 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 many ways that you can come together. And if after your 5 minutes you want to continue, wonderful. If not, your 5 minutes allowed your bodies to reunite and stay connected. And so there's immense power in that. And that brings up one of the other questions that I know I read earlier in preparing was, well, what happens when one partner's, I'm going to combine a couple of questions together, but when one partner has a lower sex drive than the other? Or what happens when one partner's kind of lost interest and I'm still interested? And so there, it's honoring each person. If we fight it and we try to get them to have sex when they're not feeling it, not typically going to do great things for the relationship. And most likely it's going to be counterproductive. Because the more we push somebody to do something, the more they retreat. I don't want anything to do with it. And they back away. And so that exploration is number one, first and foremost, to honor where they are. And to honor your desire without making them wrong. So bringing the truth of your desire. Bringing the truth of what turns you on. Bringing the truth of your wishes. And to honor the partner. And so I remember a time when early on when I was struggling and I was in a relationship and I was struggling to find my sexuality, and one of the sacred sexuality teachers, in this case a teacher from the Taoist tradition, spoke to my partner and said, this is a time for your self-practice. This is a time for building your love with yourself. This is a time for building your connection with your own pleasure. And so that's another possibility, is not just to do it because you have to and that's your only choice. Like, if I want to get off, that's the only way I'm going to get it. So, all right, I'm stuck doing that. Or it's, how much love can I bring to myself? And it's amazing when we start bringing love to ourselves, how much more appealing we become to our partners. How much more sexy, how much more loving and lovable. And we're all lovable. But there's those moments where we're just magnetically attractive. And so letting your honor bring you your attractiveness, letting your self-love and your self-honor bring you more attractive. And then it's listening. And there's many, many, many pieces to this. And I'm giving you some of the highlights. Listening to the other person. And I find this with myself. If I get disconnected, it's like, well, what is it? Because a lot of times if I'm not getting what I really want, I'll go, oh, forget it. And not the most conscious thing to do, but I still do it sometimes. And then I stop and I go, wait a second. What is it that I'm really desiring? What is it that I'm really wanting right now? And so if the two of you together, when one partner isn't as turned on, doesn't have as much desire, is to look at what are the needs that aren't being met. Because if women are exhausted, we are so not turned on. And if we're not feeling like we're getting the pleasure and being pleasured in the way that we desire. And a lot of times we don't even know what we desire, so that's part of the challenge. Women, we have to get in touch with our desire. And then men, you get to invite us into our desire. And sometimes it works the other way, and it's the man who's not it doesn't have as much sex drive as the woman. And so it doesn't matter. We want to listen to what is it that is of interest to our partner. Is it just being held? Is it being just touched? Is it being embraced? Is it just a kiss? Is it a special kiss on the neck? God, you haven't kissed me like that there in so long. And oh, God, that would feel so good. I miss it. When you used to do that. And all of a sudden we've refound some of our turn on. So honor the lack of turn on, honor the lack of desire, and then look for what is it that is desired. And this will start to open the gateways to other desires. This will start to open what's possible. And then on a deeper level, there can be hurts and things that were spoken that we wish we hadn't spoken, or things that we spoke and we had no idea that they hurt our partner, and they've pulled back, not so interested. And if we've been in a relationship many, many years, there can be a whole pile of those unspoken things. And so the pile between us has gotten big, and we can't feel each other anymore. We can't feel our turn on. And so what is it that needs to happen to clear out those pieces? So this is another aspect of reconnecting, refinding the desire, the ecstasy that's possible. So those are some of the ways to get started looking at how to move through a challenge where there's less turn on, less desire, less interest in connecting. And I'm noticing, I'm looking back behind me, and I was going to mention this as I started, and since tonight I was sitting tonight and doing this on my own, I thought, you know what? I'm going to set this camera up, set the computer up in front of the bed, and do this from a space of talking about creating sacred space for our intimacy. So I invite each of you to just take a look at your bedroom tonight. And not that sex just belongs in the bedroom, because I think it belongs just as much on the kitchen table at times than in the bedroom. And so wherever we're called to our sexuality, to let that be free. And if the kitchen table is gross and disgusting to you, that's okay too. But especially our bedroom. And what is it that makes your space feel sacred to you? What is it that invites your space to take you deeper, man or woman. And I will say that probably in all honesty, we as women are more impacted by the environment than you are as men. It's just a fact. When things are out of place, when things are messy, chaotic, for many women, this causes us to draw our attention to all the chaos. And we can't be centered in what we're trying to experience, what we want to experience. There's also a way in which to have a woman surrender into her being, into her body, her environment nurtures her. And there are colors, there are smells, there are objects or visions that connect us with ourselves. And so I bring in very consciously into my space the things that nurture me, the things that have me surrender and in a level of bliss just by being in my space. And then where can I go from my sexuality? And so we'll talk about one of the segments of the Sacred Sexuality event will be to talk about creating sacred space. And it'll be creating sacred space in here because if I show up from a conscious, deep place, and when I talk about sacred, you don't have to believe in God. This is not about God. It's not about religion. It's about a deep honoring place. It's about a place that is in line with everything that I am, everything that my partner is, that partner that I'm loving in the moment. And so allowing yourself to drop into a space where it's not just to get off and get out of the stress that was there for the day. It's not just to have a good fuck. And those are all good things too, just chosen consciously. So one piece of what I call sacred sexuality is bringing your consciousness to your interaction. And so consciousness to your environment, your inner environment. How am I showing up? What am I bringing? We'll talk about what's the essence of your touch. And also looking at, so the space. For me, reds are incredibly nurturing. I'm wearing a red shirt. I wear red a lot. Red pillows, red sheets, red candles. Candles, although the particular candle that's in the video isn't a red candle, but there are other red candles in my spaces. And so there's a statue of a sacred goddess that for me inspires me. I love having her in my space. She reminds me of the powerful sexual being that resides in this body and gets the joy of living in this body. And so I just wanted to share, that's why I'm sitting in front of the bed and sharing that with you tonight. It was just to really invite you to take a look. Is this a space that inspires good sex? Is this a space that inspires deep connection? Is this a space that allows myself or my partner to really surrender deeply and be opened by the space that surrounds us? And so what creates that for you? And so just exploring that and inviting you to look at another aspect of what contributes to the power of our sexuality. And there's so many things. There's one more question. And, this one's a good one. Some ladies, it says, some ladies ask to be taken. As a man, I always like to please my woman, but sometimes it's very hard to be forceful and just take her. I'm always wondering, is it too much? Is she really enjoying it? And I often feel guilty and wonder if I went overboard. So can you help me understand what this is about, what the drive is behind it? And so I wanted to honor this question because it's a really good one. And I could talk about this topic for a long time. And let's touch on some of the pieces. And I could talk about it for a long time, and there's pieces of it that are still an exploration for me. And I remember the very first time that I was introduced to this idea, like I I say an intellectual level, but on a really real level of that I wanted to be taken. And I was sitting in one of the early workshops that had such a huge impact on my awakening. And I remember him asking, he's like, okay, women in the room. And there were probably 1,500 of us. This is a big event. And it was like, how many of you have a desire to be taken? And I watched my hand go up. Like, oh, did I just do that? And yet I knew it was true. And, you know, even if we look at, you know, the books that were Shades of Grey, 50 Shades of Grey, the books that were so popular last year, have that element of being taken, of being ravished in it. And there's a way in which, for women, and this aspect plays for both, but control is a big aspect of our sexuality, and more specifically, our lack of control or being out of control, particularly in our orgasmic states, in that the only way we can surrender to that full ecstasy of an orgasm is to lose control. Our orgasms that are controlled, how good are they? You know, how much fun is that? They're good, but they're sort of short and kind of, I'll call them short and stocky. They're just sort of this event that's real quick and not full-bodied. And so there's an aspect of being ravished that helps us on that journey to letting go of our control. Now, ravished or taken also means that there's an aspect of consent. And yet that consent can be unspoken. And this comes with lovers that know each other deeply, trust each other deeply. Now, can I say that this can't happen with new lovers who don't know each other well? It can. This is where we have to trust our body and trust our listening skills and trust our communication. And for women, if it's not right, to honor yourself and make it a clear no. And so it's about, for me, the idea of being thrown down on the bed, because I feel your desire. And that aspect of like, I just was there. I didn't have to do anything. It's just like all of a sudden I feel your desire and I am taken in your desire. And so that's underneath it. It is this, it's a desire to surrender. It's a desire to be surrendered, which is very much, many of you may have heard me talk about the masculine and feminine dynamic. And it is the surrendered, receptive energy of the feminine meeting the penetrative energy of the masculine that when they come together are intensely, powerfully attractive to each other. And it is the confusion in our society of masculine and feminine energies of, I can both be the lead and I'm going to take charge and I'm going to penetrate and I'm going to make the decisions and I'm going to be the one that's driving us down this path. Well, if both of us are being the drivers down this path all the time, we're likely going to be great friends, maybe great business partners, but we're likely not going to be great lovers. And so this is the aspect of creating and polarizing and deepening the polarization of the energies. So the masculine, feminine, when a woman is ravished by a penetrative yet conscious man who's watching and aware of her, and then she can surrender more deeply into her feminine, he comes more fully into his masculine. And so if this is something that you're desiring as a woman, if it's something that you're desiring as a man, talk about it. Talk about it before. If you agree to create a space for it, and now we're not going to just talk about it and then have it, okay, I'm going to ravage you now. I'm going to take you now. That's taken all of the surrender out of it because we've already decided it's going to happen. And yet the communication around it is really important. And so here's a simple aspect or not aspect, but example of ravished or taken. Imagine, I love talking about this because it just turns me on, but that hot, sexy kiss up against the wall, where one person is up against the wall, and yes, in my feminine, I'm the one that loves to be against the wall. Now, I can pin him against the wall as well and enjoy that. But the one that makes me hot and bothered, is he's got me up against the wall. And that's an aspect of being taken. And it might be a great place to start, is what's it like to be pushed up against that wall and kissed deeply? And what's it like to bring that intensity of your penetration, the penetration of your tongue, into her? Or if you want to explore it beyond the kissing up against the wall, you can start feeling each other. And so what is it like? As I sit here and I think about my own turn on, what's it like to have that kiss now move to have his hands between my legs and feel that energy? And that's just as much. It's each thing. As I open my lips is a surrender. As I allow my body to be entered is a surrender. And there's an immense turn on when I'm fully met. And we talked about this last month, men, but your presence to us in those moments is fundamentally critical. If you're not fully present to us, you will never know if we shift or we say no. And if you can't know that, we can't trust you. So you have to be present to us in those moments. So this is a beginning exploration into taking, ravishing, being taken. And if this has got you a little uncomfortable, and there's probably potentially many moments today that have already had you uncomfortable, and just notice that. And this is part of our awakening of our sexuality. And so I've mentioned, well, actually, I want to take this moment, and we're coming close. We've got about 4 minutes left before the hour. And I want to thank you for being on here. And as I was talking about the discomfort, I'm guessing there might be moments that have turned you on and maybe you got a little hot. And then there may be moments that are uncomfortable, and something that I shared that might be part of my life or part of another's life that doesn't fit for you. And my invitation is for you to find what's true for you and to explore what your desires are, what your path of sexual awakening is, and awakening your pleasure, awakening your desire. And so there was just a couple of things that I wanted to bring up, and that is to really, as I'm saying, my desire is to honor your curiosity, for you to honor your curiosity, for you to honor your desires, and to really bring those into fullness. And gosh, here's another thing that comes up, and this is actually I get this a lot, is can I do sexuality work if I'm single? Because I'm not in relationships, so this isn't good for me. This isn't an appropriate event. It is. Actually, as a single, to do sexuality work and to discover and turn on your sexuality, yes, 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 yes. Because now when I get with a partner, I don't have to figure it all out then. I can come more fully awake to my beloved when he or she appears. So yes, singles, very much things that are possible. And I was talking about it. For me, sexuality, it taught me so much about self-love. It brought so much awakening to me in the world. I've mentioned my sexuality awakens my business world. And, to be totally honest, I had a little self-pleasuring before I got on here tonight because it alivens me. It stimulates my body. And yet, I'm just being me as the full woman that I am, but I'm allowing that sexual energy to come through my body. And so it awoke what was asleep in me. It invited me to be here. And so this aspect awakens our connection, awakens our intimacy, awakens our desire, awakens our passion, inspires our life, and creates that phenomenal, intimate connection besides the fact that it intensifies those orgasms and brings them up to a level of fire and depth and length and a fullness in our bodies that we haven't experienced before. And so I wanted to take about 90 seconds and just tell you about the upcoming, I forgot the name of it all of a sudden, but the Tantric Love and Sacred Sexuality online program that's coming up. And it's an exploration into Tantra. It's an exploration into this sacred loving that inspires our bodies, that inspires our lives. And one of the things that as we walk through this 4-week program, there will be a way in which the lover within you is so much more alive and truthfully so much more desirable, because you can bring fuller experience to that sexuality, not just in the bedroom, but desirable, more attractive, drawing the men to you, drawing the women to you, because that's attractive and alive. It's also creating a level of intimacy that most of us don't experience. We're not taught these skills, and so to connect with our eyes, to connect with our breath, to connect with our hearts, to learn to circulate the energy through our bodies that takes not just our sexual pleasure to another height, but to take our love and our connection onto an entirely new plane. And then to deepen and lengthen the orgasm, which we talked about. And then finally, I talked about how it brings into our business world. There is also an aspect of sacred sexuality that is about manifesting and healing. And I've spoken a bit about the healing, but let me talk for a second about the manifesting. Our sexual energy is the most powerful force in the universe. It is the most creative, inspiring force. And when we start to connect with that, we can manifest all kinds of things. There's practices, and I've done these with myself, I've done them with partners, so you don't need a partner to do this, is to draw on our sexual energy and send our intentions out to space, out to the universe, however we do that. But it's inviting, and it's like all this energy aligns to create our intention, our desire, our dream. And so this is another possibility of sacred sexuality. And so this event, I'm going to tell you the 4 weeks. The first week is the mind-blowing nature of sacred sexuality, Tantra, and Tantric love. It's totally mind-blowing. There's an awakening that moves us beyond what we thought was possible, who we thought we were, and what we thought we could be in the world. And then the second week is expanding your pleasure through breath, energy, and sacred touch. I gave you a couple of breathing exercises tonight. There'll be more. We'll talk about your touch. We'll talk about how you move energy and circulate that energy up through your body to extend your orgasm, but now how do you circulate it through your partner and intensify what you're both experiencing? And then the third week is bringing the divine to your love. So creating sacred space, creating that space in your home. So we'll talk about very specific things that you can do within you, with your partner, in your space, to enhance the power of your sexuality. And then finally, the last week will be very specific daily practices for sacred sexuality. And again, those practices are whether you're in relationship or you're single. They work either way. So if you're ready to explore the realms of sacred loving, if you are ready for the deep intensity of connection and orgasm that's possible, then I'd love for you to join me starting March 13th for the Tantric Loving and Sacred Sexuality online. It's all online, it's all going to be on video, but it'll actually have an interactive component different than this. And because you took your time and your energy and your commitment and some level, I'm guessing, of desire to be on this or to listen to this recording, that you get 50% off. And so the discount code for you is TALKSEX, TALKSEX, all in capital letters. Put that code in when you register, you get a 50% discount. And for the first 5 people that register, because I know you guys are really committed, you get the free downloads of my day-long Liberating Your Sexual Self workshop that is powerfully phenomenal. and goes deeply into expressing our desires and more into manifesting and creating and awakening that powerful energy. So that's coming up starting on March 13th. I'd love for you to join me. This is such a joy for me. I can't begin to tell you the honor and the privilege and the turn on and the joy that comes from being able to share this with you. And in the world, I offer these workshops, I offer these events because it's funny, all of a sudden the emotion comes, but I know the pain of not having this. I know what it's like when it's not awake. I know what it's like when I can't communicate with my partner because I don't know what to say. I don't know how to express it. I'm frustrated beyond what I can even imagine. And this is why I do what I do, because I've been there. I've been there in sex, I've been there in love where I couldn't feel loved. And so I truly believe, as Dr. Oz talks about, that our world needs turned on people, turned on in our love, turned on in our light, in our passion, in our world, turned on through owning that we are sexual beings. And so I'm starting to think about it as a movement. And if that calls to you, then please come play with me. Oh, I love you. I'm grateful to you. Thank you for playing. And I will be back next month. And we're going to talk about more sex and more sex. And you guys keep sending me your questions and we'll keep playing. Have a great night.